Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06. Thanks for tuning in here on a Tuesday morning. It's going to be a blast, I promise. Starting at 6:35, we'll talk to James Rosen, Newsmax senior White House correspondent. Apparently there's some drama between Team Biden and Team Kamala. 7:05, our buddy Tom Fitton is out with a new book. He, of course, of Judicial Watch. He'll be in studio to talk about it. 7:35, Ken Cuccinelli, former Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security and former Virginia Attorney General. And then at 8:35, Rodney Scott, former chief of the U.S. Border Patrol. They just endorsed Donald Trump. We're going to talk about that. And his opinion of Bill Clinton basically criticizing Kamala Harris about unvetted, undocumented immigrants. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. That was a great moment, wasn't it, Julie?
That was. Good morning.
Good morning. You know, we're 3 weeks away from Election Day.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, and we expect lots of stories to sort of drop, right? Yeah. We had one last week. We had various stories in the month of October. They call them October surprises. Mm-hmm. It happens. Some of them are engineered by the media. Some of them are engineered by the campaigns. The latest from Christopher Rufo is hardly an October surprise, but it's something that he and his team must have been investigating over the course of several weeks. And yes, I think it's been released right now for maximum effect. Kamala Harris's plagiarism problem. It specifically focuses on a book that she wrote. I'm using Chris Plant's quotation marks with my fingers, called Smart on Crime. Yeah, I know. Anytime Kamala Harris writes a book with smart in the title, that's a red flag right there. To her supporters, the vice president's rhetorical flourishes represent the values of compassion and optimism. To her detractors, her reliance on platitudes and tautologies demonstrates her unfitness for the presidency. But, as we have discovered in this exclusive report, another element appears to exist within Kamala Harris's rhetorical universe: plagiarism. Apparently, the vice president airlifted, as Chris Rufo puts it, various sections of her book, including a copy and paste from Wikipedia. You know, you do that on the job if you're a professional or if you're trying to get a job, and you're immediately disqualified.
Oh, if you're a writer and it's a very big sin.
You're kicked out of the service academies if you're discovered to have done that for a paper for the military service academies. I know this firsthand. Well, not firsthand, but second or third hand. You're brought up on disciplinary charges, and you face
and from a professional level. I mean, you'll never be published again.
Now, you would think that the New York Times would be very, very interested in that sort of thing, right? The New York Times is the paper of record.
That's right.
So, what's the New York Times headline on it? Well, the New York Times decided to approach it in an interesting way. Their headline, believe it or not, and I'm sure you do believe it, is, quoting now, again, what would you think the headline would be if very serious, even CNN, by the way, has affirmed, they said, yeah, this is plagiarism. There's no doubt about it. But then they try to equivocate, right? But the New York Times presidential candidate nominee 3 weeks before the election accused very, credibly, thank you, of plagiarism. What should the headline be?
Well, the headline, I'll just look back at the headlines when
Joe Biden did the same thing,
was accused of plagiarism, and it destroyed his presidential aspirations. This was in the 80s, of course, and those headlines were severe.
Here's the New York Times headline: Conservative activist seizes on passages from Harris book.
Pouncing was being used at the moment. Seizes
on passages from Harris book. That's the entirety of the headline, with a picture of Chris Rufo, not a picture of Kamala Harris.
Yes, and also it says, a report by Christopher Rufo says the Democratic presidential nominee copied 5 short passages.
Right.
I love the modifiers there.
Only 5
short,
and they were
passages.
Short. Yeah. Chris Rufo has responded to this, by the way. New York Times lying about the plagiarism story. I have the receipts to prove it. Number one, the Times claims that I only argued that Kamala Harris plagiarized 5 sections involving about 500 words. This isn't true. He goes on, actually. It's sort of a long response, but he said, In my story, I wrote that Stephen Weber argued that there are more than a dozen instances of vicious plagiarism. This past Saturday, I provided the Times not only with my written analysis, so he gave this to the Times days before he had released it, which argues that there are more than a dozen, but with Weber's full dossier, which includes 18 allegations of varying severity, so the Times deliberately withheld this crucial contextual information from its readers and from the supposed plagiarism expert who, based on this limited information, called it not serious. Now, that's the other issue. They gave it to a plagiarism expert, and they said, could you please analyze this so that we can provide your expert analysis? Imagine being an expert on plagiarism, by the way. What a gig.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm busy these days as we examine Ivy League presidents and such. They gave it to a plagiarism expert to get the opinion. And the plagiarism expert said that these were not serious. That was the quote.
That is such a typical thing of the New York Times to give it to an expert, a plagiarism expert, when it's pretty obvious, as Christopher Rufo has laid out, that this was copy and pasted.
Well, it gets better because then people found the expert online.
Yes.
He has a Twitter account, an X account, and people started asking him questions. Hey, expert, how is this not serious? How is that not serious? How is this not serious? So this expert, his name is Jonathan Bailey. He replied to all of these people. Here's what he wrote. For those coming here from the New York Times article, I want to be clear. I have not performed a full analysis of the book. My quotes were based on information provided to me by the reporters and spoke only about those passages. So in other words, the reporters go to this expert
Spoon-fed him
and said, here, there's this, and there's this, and there's this. 5 passages. In other words, they deliberately withheld more than a dozen of the accusations because they were trying to manipulate the expert and run interference ahead of time.
And they wanted the expert to say a certain thing, so they only provided him with the...
So they said, Kamala Harris wrote a 800-word book on crime. Here are 5 instances of accused plagiarism. What do you think? And he said, well, if that's the case, this is not very serious.
Just astonishing.
That, by the way, doesn't mean it's not plagiarism.
That's right. That's right.
The expert did not say it was a plagiarism. So Kamala Harris, it appears, is credibly accused of rampant plagiarism, which, of course, I guess we're... I'm sorry, I have a little sneezing attack. I know. It's at that moment when you see me sneezing that you could just come in and fill time instead of just watch me with your mouth agape.
I was reading something. Gosh, you're so mean.
Kamala Harris's book publisher is appearing to release an internal memo mistakenly after plagiarism allegations. Yeah, they put out an email that wasn't meant for... Oh, my goodness, I'm just having...
I know.
There's something in the air. Chronicle Books, they're in damage control mode, and according to Chris Rufo, they accidentally sent Chris Rufo's team an internal communication. It said, this is supposed to be for the publicity department at Chronicle Books, but it ended up being a reply all. Kids, a really good lesson here to
need to
always
get rid of reply all.
Be careful with the reply all.
Yeah.
Hey, Sarah, per Lauren Hoffman, VP Executive Director of Marketing and Publicity, please do not respond or comment on any injuries regarding inquiries, regarding Smart on Crime, and please continue to forward them directly to me. Really appreciate your help. So if anyone at the book publisher is asked about plagiarism, they're told talk to PR because it's a PR issue.
But also talk to upper-level executives. Yeah. We are handling this. Yes.
It's 5:15 WMAL.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Need a new roof? Honor, respect, and trust your home with Valor. Visit valorhome.com.
All right. There's nothing more exciting than me reading from a book on the air. But for the purposes of explaining just how blatant the plagiarism in Kamala Harris's book, Smart on Crime, is, here's a quick example. 2007 press release from a John Jay College of Criminal Justice, all right, which was also reprinted on Wikipedia. High Point had its first face-to-face meeting with drug dealers from the city's West End neighborhood on May 18, 2004. The drug market shut down immediately and permanently. With a sustained 35% reduction in violent crime, High Point repeated the strategy in 3 additional markets over the next 3 years. There's virtually no remaining public drug dealing in the city, and serious crime has fallen 20% citywide. That's from a press release in 2007. Kamala Harris's book, published in 2019.
Oh, my God.
High Point had its first face-to-face meeting with drug dealers from the city's West End neighborhood on May 18, 2004. The drug market shut down immediately and permanently with a sustained 35% reduction in violent crime. High Point repeated the strategy in 3 additional markets over the next 3 years. There's virtually no remaining public drug dealing in the city, and serious crime has fallen 20% worldwide. If you weren't following along there or picking up, it's verbatim.
It's
Word
verbatim. I'm looking.
It's copy and paste.
I was watching it's absolute copy and paste.
Yeah, and it goes on.
It goes on.
It goes on and on and on.
They only left out one word and down further in the.
Which, by the way, makes it worse because it shows that they knew what they did.
They knew.
Like sometimes I have heard some plagiarists people have been accused of plagiarism, and I get the enticing siren song of plagiarism, especially when you work for a website where you're asked to churn out a lot of content on a regular basis, and you use that they copy something over for reference and then they put it into their own words and rewrite it and things like that. That's, by the way, I don't think a good thing to do either, but it's not like this.
Oh, no.
So they copied this over, and they can't claim, well, we did it and it just slipped through. We planned on rewriting it, but we just...
There are multiple incidents like this.
There's multiple incidents, and 1 or 2 words are changed. So they did go in and modify it a little bit, but just not to put it in their own words. It's really, really blatant. And again, the New York Times headline, I mean, to me, the biggest part of this story is the New York Times.
Well, this is the other thing.
Conservative activist seizes on passages from Harris' book, Julie. It's not even meant to inform their readers about anything. That's not, let's find out the facts and relay it to our audience. It's, let's modify and affect the outcome of events.
Well, also, Christopher Rufo put this report together and then handed it on a silver platter to the New York Times. He didn't want the glory. Yeah. He didn't want to break this story. He's saying, hey, you guys, you might want to break this story. I mean, they don't even...
is that why he hadn't...
Well, I assume so.
Oh, see, I assumed he said, hey, I'm coming out with this. It's on embargo, but just so you know, it's going to hit on Monday. Because sometimes...
Sure, maybe not breaking. Maybe not breaking. But
yeah.
he was at least feeding it to them as, you could have an exclusive on this,
You can
right?
be early on it.
You could be early on it. You could be the sole, legacy newspaper. And instead they attack him. It's just amazing. But again, we are talking about a legacy media that includes 60 Minutes that won't even release the transcript of the Bill Whitaker interview. And they edited that to make Kamala look good. Yeah. They're all in. They're all panicked, and they're all in for Kamala.
This used to be the kind of thing that would ruin a presidential campaign.
Well, it did.
It literally ruined Joe Biden's campagn. He was accused credibly multiple times of plagiarism, and he was laughed out of the room.
He did. For those who don't know, I mean, we have some young viewers. For those who don't know, Biden ran before in the 80s, and he had to withdraw because he was accused of and found he admitted it. I mean, he plagiarized in college, I think it was.
He plagiarized in college, but he plagiarized on the campaign trail. He actually delivered stump speeches that were verbatim copied from the labor leader in England at the time, Nick Minnock.
Right, yeah.
So because there were side-by-side video clips. Now, again, that was during the primary where you could, defeat Joe Biden for the sake of elevating the brilliant Michael Dukakis.
Right.
To the level of presidential nominee, and that was fine. See, now when you're 3 weeks away, and if you harm Kamala Harris, that means ultimately Donald Trump will be president, well, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
Nothing matters.
Right.
Not if the New York Times, not if you're the propaganda media, because, again, this is the purpose of this, of the people in the media, when they go to journalism school and get a job at the New York Times, is not to be involved in the business of reporting news to people. It's to affect the outcome of events. It's to use their power and influence to change the world. And they realize that if they actually tell the truth about Kamala Harris, they will change the world. They'll change the world in their minds for the worse. And so better to actually be on the side of the angels of Kamala Harris. So my question for you in our final minute here is, will this make a difference? Are there people on the fence who are already hesitant about Kamala Harris who will see this and say, "Oh, that's it, I'm done"?
I don't know if it'll be this by itself. I think it's going to be a collection of things. I think people are tired of her. I think they can tell she's not genuine, and I think this is another brick, or another piece of straw that will just make people go turn away from her. And it does seem like it's this endless list of things that make her unappealing.
I think it reinforces the idea that she's a phony.
Yes.
That she's a fake, she's a fraud. This entire thing is a construct. She comes across that way, too, so that doesn't help. And I think that it does reinforce it. Does this one incident make the difference? Maybe for some people it's the final straw. By the way, real quickly, unlike the New York Times, I need to correct my. I said 2019. That was a slip of the tongue. I meant 2009. This book was written in 2009. It was right before she launched her campaign for state attorney general. This was her
Politicians do this.
Yeah.
Politicians do this.
They whip together a book real fast.
Yep. There's always there is a co-writer on this book.
Yeah.
So
and they haven't blamed her yet. That's going to be what they do.
That's coming.
If this picks up and other people actually start to talk about it and ask questions, they're going to throw this co-writer, Joan O.C.
She
Hamilton.
might come out with a big mea culpa.
It was
my
me.
fault.
I cut corners, and then she'll be your next, poet laureate of the United States. It's 5:23.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:37. It's WMAL and Julie Gunlock's here. Honestly, that's all we need to know. What more do you need to know? Julie Gunlock's here. At 6:35, we'll be joined by James Rosen. It's 7:05, Tom Fitton. 7:35, Ken Cuccinelli. Now, he's a former Attorney General of Virginia. And the Justice Department is suing Governor Youngkin and Jason Miyares for getting non-citizens off of the voter roll. You can't do that. That's a violation of
the weirdest time.
The rights of non-citizens to vote. Wait a second.
Who will think of the non-citizens?
So we'll have Ken Cuccinelli to talk about that. 8:35 brings us Rodney Scott, former chief of the U.S. Border Patrol. All right, that's Julie Gunn. I'm Larry O'Connor, by the way. Thanks for tuning in here to O'Connor and Company.
You're about to sneeze.
No, but I'm a mess this morning. Why is that? Let's have Governor Youngkin explain. So Jake Tapper has Governor Glenn Youngkin on the show, on his show. He has a show, that Jake Tapper.
Yes, he does.
And he furrows his brow a lot. Have you noticed that when he look? He has
lots of brow furrow.
He furrows the brow. He gets the extra creases in the forehead when it's something that he's really concerned about.
Yep.
Really concerning. That just a month. Well, actually, they did this, I guess, 2.5 months ago. Or no, 2.5 months before the election, I should say. Per Virginia state law, that, by the way, I think it was put into effect under Tim Kaine, ironically, that on a regular basis, the Virginia voter rolls would be purged of dead people and non-citizens. And let's just be clear on the non-citizens part of it. These are people who acknowledge, they actually checked the box at the Department of Motor Vehicles that they were non-citizens, and then went ahead and clicked the box that said register me to vote. Okay, so there's no doubt here.
There's so much wrong with how you just laid that out. Like just the idea that then the application isn't put directly into the garbage.
Right, that they're even able to do that. Exactly.
Why is that allowed to happen?
But voter fraud is non-existent. Don't forget that this never happens, right? Non-citizens never vote, we're told all the time, even if they are registered. So, by the way, why should anyone worry that they're purged off the voter rolls? Now, the by the way, I love this. We told you about this last week, that the ACLU filed suit against Virginia. And now, 1 week later, dutifully saluting and following their marching orders from the ACLU, the Justice Department follows suit.
Of course.
Because the ACLU did it, so we better get behind it as well. That's how things operate in this town all of a sudden. The ACLU claims that, well, someone may have registered as a non-citizen, which is a felony, but now since then they've naturalized and they've become a citizen, and now you're going to purge them off the voter rolls. Well,
they can re-register.
Thank you. If that's the case, when you show up to vote in Virginia and for some reason you're not there, you do a provisional ballot and it gets sorted out in the end. So we already have that stopgap set up. They really seem bound and determined to make sure that people who are not eligible to vote stay on the voter rolls.
I wonder why.
You need to wonder why.
Yeah.
So Jake Tapper furrows his brow and has Governor Youngkin on, and he expresses grave concerns over the voting rights of people who have no right to vote. Think about that for a minute. This is an infringement on the voting rights of people who have no right to vote. That's the argument being made. Here's Glenn Youngkin.
Why not just honor that 90-day period?
Well, let me just first begin. It's anything but a purging program. It begins with someone identifying themselves as a non-citizen. And I guess I would posit back to you, do you think that non-citizens, when they've self-identified as a non-citizen, should stay on the voter roll and therefore be in a position to potentially vote in a presidential election?
I don't think any non-citizen should vote. How are they self-identifying? How does that happen?
They actually tick a box that says, I am a non-citizen, or they do not answer the question that they are a citizen.
Who preps Jake Tapper for these interviews?
There's actually a box
Right.
you can check.
But understand, and by the way, the what you didn't hear was Jake Tapper's question, because Glenn Youngkin first had to push back and say, you called this a purge of the voter rolls, which of course sounds like
They have these words: pouncing, seizing, purging.
Yes.
And therefore, they self-identify that they are not a citizen in the United States of America. And this is why this is so out of bounds in my mind from the Justice Department. They fully understand this. They understand the process starts with a person self-identifying as a non-citizen, and then there is a match with that person's name on the voter rolls, and they are given not just one, but up to 3 times in order to try to cure it. And this is why I find this to be a very, very unreal moment that is stunning, that they filed this suit 25 days before a presidential election, when in fact this has been going on in accordance with our Constitution, the federal Constitution, and state law since 2006.
2006. Who was governor in 2006? I was right. I did it off the top of my head. It would be Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine was the governor. He was inaugurated January of 2006. So he signed this into law. And so now the Justice Department is claiming that, well, we have a federal statute that says you can't do anything with the voter rolls 90 days in front, which, by the way, I love that. How about changing the way absentee ballots are validated and counted and received and authenticated 90 days out from an election? Because that all changed quite a bit in 2020, and I don't remember the Justice Department getting their panties in a wad about it. So good on Governor Youngkin pushing back on Jake Tapper. And then this is what's happening right now, and you need to know about it. And then the governor's going to hold firm. And one wonders 2 things. Why are they so intent on having non-citizens on the voter rolls? And number 2, why are they even so concerned about Virginia? It's Virginia. They've got it in the bag, right? Yep. Ken Cuccinelli, former Attorney General for Virginia, and also someone who knows a little bit about immigration and citizenship laws. He'll join us to talk about this at 7:35.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Release the big dog. That was the term that was being used when it was announced that Kamala Harris was going to have Bill Clinton stump for her in the South.
God.
Release the big dog, and they get him out to get Bubba out there because he's going to talk to those Southern voters. He's the last Democrat to really do well with Southern voters.
Yeah, and he is not the Bill Clinton of the 90s.
Clearly, he isn't.
Oh, dear.
He doesn't sound like the Bill Clinton of the 90s, and well, he doesn't really think on his feet. I've been trying. Ben Domenech made a very interesting point on this in saying, the last couple of election cycles, when Bill Clinton goes out to stump, he really acts like he's delivering a monologue on some sort of, think tank panel. He just starts going off and talking about, and he rambles, and it's not really. And so he started doing that in Georgia, where there have been concerns about illegal immigration and border security and how it has affected crime in the area. And he was trying to make a broad point about, this is Bill Clinton, who was, when he was running for president, he's like, well, you got to secure that border, and you should only, no illegal immigration. And
Bill
that's how
Clinton
Democrats
of the 90s
used to be.
is practically conservative.
Oh, Bill Clinton of the 90s is like a MAGA supporter.
Exactly.
Yes. So here he is talking about Laken Riley specifically. And, well, I'll just take it away, Bubba.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened. But if they're all properly vetted, and that doesn't happen, and America is not having enough babies to keep our populations up, so we need immigrants that have been vetted to do work, there wouldn't be a problem. And he couldn't keep people all torn up and upset.
That, except for he can't keep people all torn up and upset, which is a pejorative against Donald Trump, that he's just getting people upset about it. Yeah. But everything up until that point could have been something Donald Trump said on a stump speech.
Absolutely.
Laken Riley was here and murdered somebody because the murderer was unvetted. We want legal immigration, but we want to do it properly and vet them because actually we need people in this country, not just for our economy, but also because of replacing our rapidly declining birth rate. Yeah. Now, it's also ironic that a person who champions killing babies before they're born is lamenting the problem with our birth rate. We'll set that aside for now. Bill Clinton out. Now, we're told that he was trying to make a broader case that Trump stopped the immigration bill in the Senate, which is, of course, a lie.
Right.
And also, Laken Riley's murderer was let into the country well before that bill was proposed in the Senate, so it wouldn't have affected Laken Riley's death.
Exactly. He was, everybody on Twitter pounced, the left
Yes.
pounced. I was like, well, you didn't listen to the longer speech, which I did. And it doesn't in any way solve the Laken Riley problem. It doesn't do anything to
sure
solve
did.
that problem.
And I hate everyone says, well, you should listen to the whole speech. I'm sorry. We live in a news bite era where news bites are used in news and politics to define a topic and define a candidate. And Bill Clinton knows that because he benefited from the news bite
Bill
era.
Clinton made complete sense.
Yes.
That young girl would be alive today if they had prevented that murderer from coming into the country. And we don't even know how many. What was there? We do have a number of murderers who are sitting in jail.
It's 13,000. 13,000 known murderers.
And those
Not all of them are sitting in jail. They were released in this country.
That doesn't account for the gotaways and the people who snuck in. I mean, it is terrifying. And what he said was absolutely correct.
Let's hear it again. Bill Clinton in Georgia stumping, we're told, for Kamala Harris, although I have a theory about this.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Someone in the crowd should say, hey, who was in charge of vetting and letting people in?
Yeah.
All right, so here's my 3D chess
I have a
question for you. Do you think Hillary must hate the fact that in her lifetime there's going to be another woman as the first woman
100%.
president? And it's someone like Kamala Harris, who, say what you will about Hillary Clinton, she's not dumb. She put in her years. She put in her time. She had to put up with Bill and swallow her pride, et cetera, et cetera. You know that it burns her, but do you think maybe
still burns her
underneath just a little bit, hey, honey, I'm going to go down and stump for Kamala. Don't do too good a job. Maybe there's a little subterfuge going on here.
I can't help but wonder. It was funny on Twitter yesterday. There was these sort of rumors going around that Kamala's going to be replaced on the ticket. I mean, of course, it was
3 weeks out.
It was from a fairly legitimate account, and they were saying that she's crashing and burning, and that this was on purpose, and it's going to be Hillary Clinton, which of course I do not believe for 1 minute. But it was funny, all the rumors swirling around after Bill Clinton did this, because people, it was too perfect for Trump. Essentially showing a reasonable Democrat. Look at how far we've come.
Well, exactly.
This was conveyed to if you can make a political ad, this used to be the Democrat Party.
Yeah, and if you make this argument today that Laken Riley would still be alive if the border were secure and people were vetted when they come into this country, you're called a racist, a xenophobe, you're called a hate monger, that you're and well, that was Bill Clinton in his own words right there. Is there trouble in paradise between the Clintons and Kamala Harris and Biden and Kamala Harris? That's what the rumors suggest. James Rosen from Newsmax will join us at 6:35. And if there's dirt at the White House, he knows about it. It's 5:53.